Firstly, I apologize. I have to leave a few minutes early. Appointment for my children's school. Okay, so yesterday, we'll back up a little bit more actually. The Gemara that we learned, on which we're learning the halachas now, discussed really three things. CHAROSET. Actually, the correct order would be it discussed moving the plate aside at the Seder, or moving the table aside in those days. Number two, it discussed the broken matzah, or portion of matzah, because it has to be the poor man's bread. And the third thing is the CHAROSET. Now, in the Shulchan Aruch, we went a little bit backwards. We started with the CHAROSET, right? And then when we're done, we're going to go to move the broken matzah and then moving the table away. Now, when we discussed, so yesterday, we looked at the Rebbe's Haggadah on CHAROSET. Now, the Rebbe's Haggadah on CHAROSET, what we did was, which is correct, we looked at CHAROSET, number one, when it was being made and set on the table. Number two, when it's being used at Murder. When we did this Shulchan Aruch, I was remiss in that we did, when it was set by the table, we never looked at the part of the Shulchan Aruch which discusses how you do it when you actually eat the Murder. You actually eat the CHAROSET. Right? In the Haggadah, we did that. We looked at when it's made, the ingredients, and then we talked about when it's used at Murder time. And when it came to the Shulchan Aruch, we didn't do the part where it's used at Murder, so we do that today.
Okay.
And the same thing we're going to do with the broken matzah. Number one, when it's set at the table, which is basically yachatz, breaking the matzah. And then number two, when it's eaten. That's also going to be linked to the halachas of that as well.
Okay.
And then the next thing in the Shulchan Aruch is going to be the moving the table aside. And then that will complete the Shulchan Aruch. As well as we're going to do the same thing with the Rebbe's Haggadah. We'll look at the Rebbe's Haggadah in terms of setting the matzah up and then breaking the middle matzah and then eating the matzah. We're going to look at those sections of the Rebbe's Haggadah. The Rebbe's Haggadah on moving the plate away, we actually learned once. These are a little bit out of order just because we're following the Gemara instead of the Shulchan Aruch. So we have to like match the Shulchan Aruch to the Gemara, so it comes a little bit out of order. But I think we're getting a full rounded picture, Hashem's help. And then from there, we'll go back to the Gemara, which is basically the Mishnah that discusses the next item, which is the recitation of the Haggadah itself. So this is the program for the next little while. So for today, again, we're looking at the second part of CHAROSET from the Shulchan Aruch, which we did already in the Rebbe's Haggadah, which is essentially when we use the CHAROSET, which is at Marar, in terms of our Seder order. So that would be in chapter 475. So these two halachas are going to be 473 and 475. Chapter 473 discusses from the first cup of wine all the way to the second cup of wine. So that includes setting your kaira so that we have the ingredients of CHAROSET. It's also going to include breaking the middle matzah, which we'll discuss. It's also going to include moving the table away, which we're going to discuss. It also included, what else did it include that we learned already from 473? It included the laws of Kiddush, which we discussed. There's other things in 473 that I'm not remembering that we covered. And 475 goes from the second cup till the end of the Seder. So that includes kairach, which we learned. It includes
Does it include leading?
It included leaning. Oh no, leaning was in 472. Maybe I think it was earlier, right? There were
The brachas for
the brachas for the karpas we covered. That was in 473. The brachas of Amora we covered in 475. Right, so people went back and forth between 475 and 473. In 474, we learned also what was 474. About what was it that we don't about leaning? Maybe what was 474? Can't remember. We learned that as well. What was 474? Oh, it was about not making. It was about whether you make a new bracha at the second cup of wine. No. It was something about not making a bracha on something. Can't remember. Okay, what? No, it's not. Okay.
Oh, is it for Yekilin midnight?
No. Yeah. No, it just now was in 475, which we did learn actually. There was two just now, 473 and 475. Actually, we didn't. Did we learn the washing of 475? I don't remember.
No, from where we learned it, but from where?
But we did cover the washing before. Yeah, so that was also that's 473, 475 as well. Anyway, okay, let's begin. It's chapter 475 in the Alter Shulchan Aruch, so 475. chapter 475, right?
Okay,
Chapter 475,
okay.
halacha number 11. That's what we're going to be doing.
11.
Halacha 11. So this is Aleph, we're going to go to 11. Okay, acher sha'achal. So again, this is what we're getting to now is the eating of marar, because what we're covering is the usage of charoset, right? We discussed the making of charoset, and now we're discussing the usage of charoset. In the episode, we already did both. But in the Shulchan Aruch, we only did the making of charoset, and now we're going to talk about the usage of charoset. And the usage of charoset comes at the point at which you eat marar. That would be the usage of charoset.
Yes.
Right?
Mhm.
The halachas just before this are the eating of matzah, which we were going to get to next, because that's going to be linked to the broken matzah. So we're going backwards a little bit. And the halachas that follow marar are the halachas of kairach, which we also covered. Because again, the Gemara is not in order. So we're trying to follow the Shulchan Aruch, which is in order, using the Gemara, which is not in order. So we end up using the Shulchan Aruch not in order. But that's just the way it is. But still, the picture is being rounded up. I hope.
Yeah.
Okay. So halacha number 11 in chapter 475. After he's eaten the requisite amount, which is the olive-sized portion of matzah, yikach miyad, he takes right away, or he takes immediately. One should take immediately. Kazayis marar, a olive-sized portion of marar. Yeah. So this usage of the word immediately is subject to discussion. And I don't think we're going to get into that right now. It's not so important, but it's an interesting word that's being added here. In footnote 40, he adds suggested to explain why it's so important. We're going to leave it alone. It's connected to the kairach, which actually you might imagine, because right, now that his opinion, the kairach is linked to the matzah and the marar, so do it right away so you don't make an interruption. Anyway. Okay.
The same in mind.
That's right. You have to have a mind from the matzah to the marar. Linked to the fact that in the Altar's opinion, the brachas of kairach and matzah have to, the brachas of marar and matzah have to go to kairach, and they have to do it right away so you don't interruption. Okay. Anyway, right after he finishes the marar, he takes, after he finishes matzah, he takes the marar. Now, the shekena kuloi, the charoset. He's got to dunk the entire thing, the entire marar, into charoset.
We learned yesterday, no.
Because we learned from the Rebbe Sagada, which is already built on this.
Today it's not.
We're backing up a little bit in history.
Backing up
in time. That's right. We're backing up in time.
Right,
we're going from the last 50 years, Rebbe, to 300 years ago, Alter Rebbe. What? You have to erase the information from yesterday. No, but the information from yesterday is built on this, as we'll see. Okay, so at this point, if he's dipping the entire marar charoset based on what you know, let's go with that. What's the reason for charoset if we're dipping the whole thing in? Kappa. Kappa. To kill off the kappa. What is kappa? Puts the Alter Rebbe in parentheses. He takes the opinion of worm, as the Rebbe did, because the Rebbe took it from the Alter Rebbe Sagada. And again, the question remains why. But nonetheless, Perush, the meaning of this is, the meaning of kappa is, min telas, a kind of worm, yesh b'marar, that lives within the marar, v'meisai de charoset, and the charoset kills it off. Yeah. The footnote there. Let's look at the footnotes. Because it's to Gemara. Footnote 43. Okay, so he's got to dunk the entire marar into charoset to rue it, to get rid of the kappa. Footnote 43. So you go to the back, the footnotes. Back. To the end, the footnotes. Yeah, you see it? 43. Rashbam, in his gloss to Psachim, right, the Gemara that we learned, explains that there's no concern about the possibility of eating forbidden insects when one eats the marar. Someone asked about that. Because as long as the insects have have not departed from the vegetable in which they are found, the prohibition against partaking of them does not apply. It's only when the worm is on the surface, it's embedded within, you don't have a problem.
Kind of like a worm in an apple kind of thing.
Yeah, once you see it, what's comes out. Yeah, well, the worms might be different, but okay. It should be noted in the parentheses there, or the brackets, however, that this ruling is not universally accepted, and in other instances, one should not act stringently. Okay.
We're talking about insects. There is insects on the food.
Sure. Yeah, your food's.
You have to take magnet to.
You're supposed to check your vegetables for worms for sure. And wash it. Tosfos offers a different explanation, stating that it was permitted to eat the marar because even in Talmudic era, kappa was not commonly found in marar. Nevertheless, since there was a possibility that kappa was present, it was necessary to dip the marar into charoset because precautions are always taken when there's a possible threat to life.
Okay, just an aside. My brother
Yeah.
is my brother's like a little amateur farmer, and he grows. He has lettuce beds, and when I see him washing it for the meal, or like dinner salad, he has to wash every leaf here. There's worms and
Because he doesn't put any
Yeah,
pesticides.
right.
It's all natural. It's
maybe
organic.
What is happening?
Certainly. But those things aren't necessarily dangerous. They're just,
No, no.
I don't know. Yeah, it could be. It's
I
possible.
don't think it has anything like the cotton, but it's just,
But in those instances,
they
for
exist. I
example,
mean,
sure, but what your brother's cleaning is on the surface, which is definitely halachically problematic, which we would have to check also for.
yeah,
Halachically speaking, it seems, at least when the Rashbam describes it, it's like embedded within the fruit, within the thing. You can't even see it.
embedded.
That's why you need the charosis to kill it,
Okay, got it.
and there's no problem of.
Missed that, you know.
Someone asked that if you're killing the kappa and it's still sitting there, how are you allowed to eat it? Well, someone asked that this year. This is the answer.
Okay, this is the answer. All right.
Okay, let's continue.
How the insects come if you prepare the charoset before there was no insects? It's created by itself.
I don't understand the question.
The insects in the charoset
It's not the charosis, it's in the morar,
It's in
and the marrow.
in the lettuce.
Then what's happened? If you prepare the marrow, there is no insects.
So this kind of worm called kappa, it was inside, so you couldn't even wash it off. It was
Uh-huh.
inside. That's what it seems like. And the charosis killed it.
You have to take magnet to see.
No, you can't even see it at all. You don't have to take a magnet. You can't see it. It's in.
inside.
It's inside. You can't see it.
Okay.
So it seemed like the charosis killed it off. Right? That's why we're dipping the charosis.
So it
Dip it.
sounded more like a bacterium of some sort.
Yeah,
Not a
yeah.
worm.
I don't know if we knew
Physically speaking, I don't know. If
Yeah.
it could be embedded.
I don't know if a worm means that big. It could be really tiny.
That's true too. It could be
Yeah.
like microscopic.
Yeah, a tiny little thing. Yeah. So you're right. It could be like worm and toxin
Micro-
can almost be
micro-
interchangeable at this.
sorry,
At that tiny level, it could be that worm
micro.
and toxin are almost interchangeable because you get so micro.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point. Perhaps that's a way of reconciling the two views.
Right.
They're really actually the same thing, just so micro that you can interchange them. Anyway, okay, back to the main text. So you have to dip the karpas in the morar into charosis because of kappa. Back to the main text, yeah? Halacha 11. Va'achshav nowadays, yeah, back to halacha 11. You see it? Va'achshav nowadays, after the parentheses, our custom is not to dunk the morar completely in the it's not our custom to dunk the morar completely, only partially, right? Ella petibel b'miktsas. We only dip the morar partially in the charosis. That's our custom, right? There are those that settle this, like they justify this custom because the fisha kappa because we no longer have the issue of kappa nowadays. Nowadays meaning already 300 years ago, as opposed to 2,000 years ago. Therefore, all we are left with in terms of dipping the morar is for the mitzvah, which is to remember the mortar, which we explained when we made the morar, which Calter explained already when we made the charosis. Nonetheless, we still don't make a bracha on it. If you should tafel the morar, because it's secondary to the morar. The nifte b'birchas morar, it's covered by the bracha of the morar. On this is the Rebbe commenting and saying that the bracha here is referred to as the mitzvah bracha, that it's a mitzvah that's second to the morar. Okay. Let's think about this halach here. If you read this halacha, what would you say is the primary reason for charosis? You would say kappa. How does he say it? He says you have to dip the entire morar into charosis because of kappa. As to the fact that nowadays people don't, well, we're going to justify that custom, right? We can justify the custom because kappa is not around. It's only for the mitzvah, and therefore do a little bit is okay. So what's the primary reason? What's the primary reason?
Today.
What's the primary reason for charosis at all? For the way he framed it.
Remember tomorrow.
Listen again. He said you have, this is what he says. As soon as you're done your matzah, take your maror, dip it completely into charoset because of kappa. Now, as the fact that nowadays we don't do this, well, we'll justify that custom by saying kappa doesn't exist and we're only doing it for the mitzvah. So the way I just phrased it, which is the Shulchan Aruch here, Shulchan Aruch, which one would you say is the primary reason for charoset? Really? He only phrased that as we'll justify the custom.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, right.
Right?
Well, the primary was kappa then.
So it seemed like.
Yeah, the way you said it.
But because we don't do it anymore, we'll justify the custom by saying it's only for the mitzvah. The mitzvah you don't need to have so much.
That's secondary.
Yeah. But when we looked at Haggadah yesterday,
we learned yesterday that actually the charoset is a qualifier for the intensity
of the slavery.
Slavery.
So when we looked at it, was like,
it doesn't allowed it to be
no bracha,
continued, but no bracha.
Which is built on Alter Rebbe here, right? Because Alter Rebbe just finished saying, we're going to justify the custom of dipping it a little bit because it's not for the kappa, it's just for mitzvah, and you don't make a bracha on the mitzvah because it's secondary to the maror, which they're explained because it's secondary as the mitzvah because it highlights the intensity and so on. Right? That was Rebbe explaining this.
Yes.
Right? But the way that Rebbe framed it, he didn't frame it by saying, you should really do the whole thing because of kappa. Or justify it by saying you don't have to do the whole, you don't have to dip it all the way because of Rebbe didn't do that whole exercise. Then Rebbe went straight to saying dip only a little because it's a mitzvah and you don't have to have the whole thing. Shake it off, not to, and actually you should shake it off because that way you should. You actually should only dip it a little bit. That way you don't ruin the flour. You don't diminish the flavor of the maror, right? So the Rebbe framed it as if the primary is mitzvah, right? Whereas Alter Rebbe frames it as if the primary is kappa, but we're going to justify the custom of doing a little by saying it's only a mitzvah, right? Because kappa is no longer around. Yeah.
It could be that the Alter Rebbe is compiling opinions from all over. So he has to frame it that way.
Correct.
To appease all the opinions. But the way.
But in practice.
That's right. That it's not just
correct.
Secondary, but it's primary.
Correct. The Rebbe is commenting on the Alter Rebbe's Siddur, which is instruction. And an instruction is going to give you the final ruling of the way we practice today, which today we only dip a little because of mitzvah. And therefore, when you're thinking of it that way, actually you should only dip a little. That's what the Rebbe said yesterday. Only dip a little so you don't ruin the maror flavor. But the Alter Rebbe is giving us the whole picture of the whole halacha and its evolution. We'll start off with kappa. Moreover, the Rebbe comments elsewhere in Likutei Sichos, among his other commentaries, the Rebbe explains like this, that actually the reason why we say kappa is primary is not because inherently it's primary, but because even if you believe charoset is for a mitzvah, you still have to concern yourself with kappa because kappa is a reality. And therefore kappa is the reason which covers both opinions. So even if you're on the mitzvah opinion, you still have to concern yourself with kappa, which means in the old day, if you were following the view that it was a mitzvah, you would still have to dunk it completely because, hey, kappa exists. But today, where kappa doesn't exist, you're left with only mitzvah, and that becomes the primary. Because it always was the primary. It just so happens that even if mitzvah is primary, kappa is a reality that you have to contend with. And therefore you have to dip it completely. That's what the Rebbe learns this paragraph here. Yeah, which would explain why the Rebbe comes off in his comment to Haggadah comes off a bit different than the way the Shulchan Aruch comes off here. Yeah, as you just explained.
And we have to keep that in mind, as you mentioned, when you wrote this.
That's right. When he wrote this, he was compiling halacha, whereas when he writes the Siddur, he's giving instruction of what to do.
Saying completely consistent with
correct.
What's written in the
right. That's correct.
Siddur.
Because a compiled code will be much broader than a manual of do, don't do. Right? The do, don't do will only give you the bottom line of how you're supposed to behave today, which is what the Rebbe is commenting on as a Haggadah. But this is a treatise of the background, the history, all the opinions, compiling them and so on. That's correct. Very good. Okay, weiter. Halacha Yud Beis. And we have. No, we don't. 10 minutes. We have halacha 12, 13, and 14 to cover. Hopefully, we can do it all today. Let's see. Halacha Yud Beis, halacha 14. Says after you've dipped it into the charoset, you make a bracha. Asher kedushanim mitzvaysav. Thank you, Hashem, for sanctifying us with your mitzvahs. Mitzivanu, you commanded us. Allah chilas maror. You commanded us regarding the eating of maror. You should not make the bracha before you dip. You have to make the bracha as close as possible to the performance of the mitzvah. The hainu, which in this case, the performance of the mitzvah is achila, the eating. And you should do so as much as you can bring the mitzvah close to the eating, the bracha close to the eating, do so. And therefore, dip, then bracha, then eat. That way there's no interruption between your bracha and your eating
Like karpas.
with the dipping, just like karpas. And when you dip it into charoset, you should be careful, like to take it out right away. Don't let it sit there and soak in the charoset. Lest you, God forbid, diminish the flavor of its bitterness by the tartness of the charoset, which we explained yesterday has to happen. Or 2 days ago, we explained it has to be there. We top that for this reason. One should shake the charoset off the marar right after he dips. Dip, shake it off. Because once you dip, the kappa is killed, and especially nowadays, no kappa. And the only charoset is just a dip for remembrance. So once you dip, you get the remembrance. You shake it off. That way, you don't offset and diminish the flavor of marar, which is the primary. You have to taste the flavor of bitter. Good gimel. Even though you are not required to lean when you eat the marar, for reasons explained in 472, which we learned because it's all about freedom, and marar is not freedom; it's about slavery. You come look nonetheless. If the person desires to recline, rashoy, he may do so.
The cigarette.
Like the cigarettes.
Shorthand for
increase your leaning as much as you want. No one's stopping you.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, many do, as we learned. Okay, halacha dalet, and then we'll pick up tomorrow, God willing, with the breaking of the matzah. Yidal, apal pisha matzah tzarich levloya kol hakazayas. Even though when it comes to the marah, to the matzah, one is supposed to swallow the entire kazayas bevas achas in one shot lechatchila in the first instance, right? So really, a person should bite the matzah to the point that he has. We'll learn this. We'll learn this soon when we get to the halachas of eating the matzah. But you're supposed to chew as much of the matzah as possible, so that you have a full kazayas in your mouth, and then swallow at once. You come look at them, and that's the halacha when it comes to matzah in the first instance. Although, as we'll learn, if you didn't do that, you still fulfill your obligation. We'll get to all of that. But that's the primary way of doing it. You come look at them nonetheless. But marar, when it comes to the marar, if it's very difficult to swallow the entire thing at once, you can rely on the view which says that it's not required at all to swallow the entire portion at once. You can swallow piece by piece. So long as you should not wait. There shouldn't be a time lapse from the first swallow to the last swallow more than the amount it takes to eat a meal, which is a couple of minutes. Yeah, so, and we're going to learn this. God will get the halachas of matzah. But the Rebbe, who had a hard time chewing because he lacked teeth, it seemed to me from my reading of the accounts and the diaries that the Rebbe would spend a lot of time chewing the matzah, but would only swallow the whole thing at once, and that way he would fulfill the mitzvah of eating it within the time frame. Okay, halacha 15 already begins our discussion on kairach, which we already did. So we're slowly piecing together the whole Shulchan Aruch of the night of the Seder. Okay, I'm sorry I'm rushing here. Wonderful day. I've got to run to a meeting. And
thank you so much, Rabbi.
Judge,
God bless you all. Have a wonderful day.
Tomorrow we'll get to the other part of the Gemara which we learned, which is the broken matzah. We'll start with the breaking itself, yachatz, and then we'll go to the eating and how that, because it plays into how you make the bracha. We spoke about that. Having 2 whole matzahs, 1 half matzah when you make the bracha. So we'll get into all that, God willing, over the coming days.
Have a wonderful day, Hebra. Thank you, Rabbi.
Hey, Judge.